yesterday was all about presenting the results of the endeavours so far for Go4. Today we're thinking more about the future. And there's some very, very interesting conversations to be had, I think, this morning. But first of all, we are going to say hello to you from Mario. So Mario is going to welcome us in his language, and I want then you to say it back to him. It's going to be easy.
Kokomang ke wisese the mikran ke mkusinga ke kokomang kang the mikran ke tamang chawa ke conference yang the mikran da kum tutu ta conference da muslim kan atekam dibi hawa mchua dai tutu ge ai conference ya ke kokomang kang manjoi.
Great stuff. So now just say just the one word that they can good morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kokomang.
Okay.
Say everybody kokomang. 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 Ayoyu y3 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 y3.
I wouldn't trust them an inch. I thought, what was wonderful, I thought you were sniffing every time you tried to click. It could go horribly wrong for you all. But I'm now going to hand over to Doris to introduce this first session, which, as you see, has a cast of thousands. And you'll need the microphone.
Good morning, everybody. We hopefully have here the most international of all our panels. It's the Global Voices panel, and it's also an experiment. And just to test their commitment, these are people from some of the hottest countries in the world, and they have come from their summer. So we ordered this snow and this wind in order to see whether they're coming, and they're all here. And the experiment is that this is a keynote group. So we have a similar time to a keynote speaker, but we wanted you to hear the voices from all over the world, 10 from Progress, and we have one guest from Responsibility. So everybody will only speak with one punchy statement for 2 minutes. And I brought a musical instrument. If they go over the 2 minutes, you will hear a sound, and then we will move over to the next person. And everybody will introduce themselves, and you, I hope, will be very impressed with the presence we have assembled for you on this panel. Thank you, and I hand over to the first speaker, who is Michael.
My name is Michael Davis. I'm at the Center for the Study of Ethics in the Professions at Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. I'm a philosopher by training. My work in the last 30 years has concerned, among other things, engineering ethics. I'm supposed to say what struck me about RRI. For me, who reported on broader impacts, the one thing that stood out for RRI is the idea of interactive involvement in the research from the beginning. That, I think, is something which has not hit the U.S. yet, and certainly not hit our funding agencies. And I was disappointed at how little attention that was given over the last day, because I think that is a novel way to approach research and to make it relevant to society. That from the beginning, the end users and other parties would be involved in the design and carrying out of the research and development, and all the way from the very beginning to the ultimate product. And that's all I have to say.
Can I just say one more thing before I hand over to Australia? We brought PowerPoints, which I will start now, which will give you, whilst we speak, pictures from all our engagements from all over the world. But now I hand over to Australia.
I'm John Weckert from the Centre of Applied Philosophy and Public Ethics at Charles Sturt University in Australia. My background is mainly in philosophy but also in IT. Our government recently announced a new national innovation and science agenda where the focus is on commercialisation and collaboration with industry. As far as I can see, this has only just come out, and as far as I can see, there's nothing in it explicitly on responsibility or on anything to do with RRI. Research and innovation seem to be, from reading the document, responsible to the extent that they benefit the economy, and there doesn't seem to be anything more than that in it. And our Prime Minister said recently that publish or perish, talking to academics, publish or perish will be replaced by collaborate or crumble. That's collaborate with industry. Okay, thanks. That's all I've got to say.
And now over to Malaysia.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you to the Go4 organizer for having this session, Voices Around the World. My name is Rohaya. I'm from University of Malaysia, Sarawak. We are from Malaysia and located in Borneo region. Unimas is actually one of the research partner in the responsibility. And then if you Google keyword, Google now and put keywords RRI Malaysia, you will get Rubber Research Institute Malaysia, RRI in bracket. But if you put another keyword, RRI Malaysia with Europe, you will start to see that responsibility, Unimas, and also Go4 projects. So this is actually the connection. My point is that there is already a connection between RRI and Europe. I will just articulate within the context that I can understand. RRI is indeed a paradigm shift in thinking from my own standpoint. When responsibility introduced RRI in Malaysia, we have several important stakeholders that come from policymakers, R&D community, NGO, and players. And then we come to certain consensus from this dialogue that we have that there is actually a real benefit through the RRI. The only thing that we need is just a platform, like what responsibility deliver. This is actually forum and observatory. So this is something that that we find it a tangible benefit. I guess the unequal information access, for example, this is actually that lead to the agreement. And in university that we serve, for example, we have a mission like bringing sustainability for diverse and dispersed community. For over 20 years, we actually working with rural community, with community around us, the marginal community. And then in this context, there are a few dimensions that actually being propagated through RRI. We actually integrated that. Ethics, governance, for instance, and then engagement. You know, when you go to the rural community, sometimes the common ethical standards, sometimes that we accept, prescribed through the university institution seem to be superficial. I'm glad to see that, you know, that this ethical standard, for example, is actually for our needs, but not for the community needs. So in this case, I see RRI is actually beyond an ethical common standard, and I think this is actually great. That's it, Doris. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From Malaysia, now to South Africa.
Good morning. My name is David Kaplan. I'm an academic, University of Cape Town, but I also work extensively with the South African government on innovation. I'm on the board of the South African Technology Innovation Agency. What I'd like to point to is a rising phenomenon in third world countries. We have seen an unprecedented movement of people out of poverty, people who still are very poor but who now have disposable income. In response to the income and the demand, we've seen innovation increasingly shift to products and also production processes, and indeed ways of doing innovation that are more appropriate to the needs of those poor people. People, as I say, who've emerged out of poverty but are still poor. So we are seeing lots of new products that are geared to poorer consumers. We're seeing lots of new production processes. For example, we're seeing much cheaper, much more robust sewing machines, metal bashing machines, tractors, tillers, etc., that allow new producers to enter the market in developing countries. Lots of products, lots of processes, particularly from China, also from India, Brazil, and other countries. So what we call inclusive innovation. We also see engagement of end consumers in the process itself of innovation in all sorts of dynamic and interesting ways. So I think, and I do believe, that throughout the third world, particularly in the emerging market countries, we are seeing a sea change in the way that innovation is done by the corporate sector, but also in the way that it's supported by governments. And I think this issue of inclusive innovation is really a game changer, because we are seeing now innovations that are directly set to meet the needs and to engage poorer consumers. And my view about RRI is to take it forward. The RRI needs to see and understand those processes, how they're being conducted, what the impacts could be and are, and how to improve with that. So I'm looking for more engagement, if you like, on the part of the European Union in those processes that are happening in emerging markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now from South Africa to China.
Good morning. I'm Han Bing from Institute of World Economics and Politics, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. At present, the grand challenges facing China are uneven development between rural areas and urban areas, insufficient supply of public services, enlargement of income gap, and poverty-stricken population in rural areas. So in order to confront with these challenges, the proposal for the formulation of the 13th five-year plan for national economic and social development, which released in October last year, set forth a general goal of completing the building of a moderately prosperous society in all respects. And it clarifies 5 approaches to realize the general goal, that is innovative development, coordinated development, open development, green development, and shared development. So I think those approaches tackling about challenges along with the societal desirability of RRI, societal desirability criterion of RRI as interpreted in Europe. In China, the science and technology innovation policies emphasizes that only when the scientific and social and technological achievements are combined with national needs, people's demands, and market demands, and the innovation value be truly achieved, and the innovation-driven development be realized. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from China now to India.
Thank you, Doris. My name is Sachin Chaturvedi. I'm an economist by training. Our take in this project was largely to evolve an index to see how issues related to access, equity, and inclusion, AEI, may contribute in terms of understanding how RRI should work. And that way we see movement along RRI as an expansion of what we yesterday discussed, technology assessment. So the features that are there in technology assessment, RRI does that kind of value addition. In countries where resources are limited, the priorities and budgetary allocations cannot be confined to innovation, which are not leading to innovative economic policies. And from that point of view, the idea of distributive justice within the framework of technology innovation is extremely important, and RRI has that potential to bring that out. We also have tried to come out in terms of this index to be calculated across different states within India to see how principal component analysis and rank correlation across different indicators is possible. So some empirical work in terms of how RRI can be conceptualized is important, and we in this project we have tried to do that. The third thing that we have evolved along this line is in terms of Amrita Sen's idea in terms of how you do the distributive justice. He, of course, picked up information society, but we have tried to see how this distributive justice brings in the concept of innovation within the framework of access, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we go from India to South Africa to Hennie, who is also on the screen, where he held the Kalahari Festival and using it for dissemination of progress.
Thank you very much. And I want to, just to say it's quite a big festival that we have annually in South Africa, so please come and join us. My name is Hennie Swart. I'm the director of the South African San Institute. I bring a message from South Africa in the context of the San indigenous peoples with focus on research where traditional knowledge is the basic source of research themes. RRI is possible and so much more effective and rewarding if the people's knowledge is recognized and shared, and where the people, usually the end beneficiaries, are involved within the process of the research. Not only will the research be more accurate, it will also have the value of the people. This is a form of benefit sharing. So in other words, just to summarize, if the people are part of the research, it becomes a joint venture, and benefits of the research are shared during the process. And that's my message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now to the Philippines.
Thank you, Doris, and good morning, everybody. Severe weather disturbances devastate my country, the Philippines, where I am a professor of political science and where I work with indigenous peoples, women, and the urban poor. The most recent was Typhoon Haiyan, which claimed almost 10,000 lives. And up till now, hundreds of thousands of women, the elderly, girls, are taking on untraditional work, including prostitution, because the man in the family cannot provide for so much deprivation in the communities. Island countries in the Pacific face daily the threat of submergence due to global warming. These people I have talked about are the most vulnerable and highest at risk, but they made the least contribution to global warming. Research and innovation from the perspective of my country and my people, the most vulnerable, must be committed to the interests and the protection of these people. When we do research, when we make decisions or we influence decision makers on the allocation of funding for research, innovation, and production, we must bear in mind carbon footprints and who are paying the price for the disturbance, for the destruction of the environment. On our part in the Philippines, in severe military and political repression, we are trying to do our part by capacitating people whose voices have been unheard, by capacitating them to speak and insist and claim on that political space that had been denied them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Tim, very good as usual. Now we have completed the session of the Global Voices, but we have two. I hope the second speaker is still on his way. We have two institutions represented here. So this is now over to TDR and World Health Organization.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rob Terry. I work for the World Health Organization and the Special Program for Tropical Disease Research and Training. A central part of the mission of the World Health Organization is to see that access to healthcare is available to all as a right and not as a privilege that's based on wealth. I think the Ebola crisis, the growing crisis in antibiotic resistance, and many other neglected diseases, they demonstrate that we need to think of new ways to prioritize and fund the health product research and development process so that it delivers drugs and vaccines that are effective and affordable for all when we need them, and where commercially driven R&D will not deliver them. The framework of responsible research and innovation offers a number of approaches which will help us achieve that aim. And it reminds me, I think, of a quote that Einstein once said, which is, "We can't solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have now concluded, except for the last speaker, whom I hope will join us. You can probably get the message of inclusion that we've been trying to promote throughout our project, including yesterday from this panel. And this also means we want to include you. This is why we only had these short statements, because now we have 25 minutes with Vivienne's help to get your questions for this panel.
What a wonderful set of presentations. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So let's think about, I mean, you put out a challenge there of how to have inclusion with a view to, particularly about carbon footprint. How do you see that inclusion? How do you see it working? Yes.
You always ask very difficult questions. There's no single formula. There's no formula, actually. I think we must identify the crucial dimensions of the problem. I think one which we are beginning to do more seriously in the country is really helping people who are most severely affected by understanding. So our research, for example, at the end of the research, we return the research to them and we discuss the findings. And we ask them, how can you use these findings so that you can influence policy at various levels in the country?
And what's their response?
Of course, yes, they understand that they need to speak, but there are situations like in the Philippines where repression could be intense and it's not easy. But there are ways, legal ways of doing it. And friends in the media are very important factors. There are very important actors here.
Okay. Anyone want to come back with any questions to our panel? And tell us who you are.
Okay, my name is Renling. I'm also from Chinese Academy for Social Sciences. I'm also with this group. My question goes to David, South Africa, because you talked about the some characteristics that the emerging markets share. So I just want to listen a little bit in details that you think at the demanding end and at the supply end of goods that taken into consideration of RRI, that are there some characteristics that the emerging economies share, as well as do you see any spaces that the emerging economies and the developed economies could collaborate in this case as well? So.
Well, thank you for the question. I think there were two questions. One, the last one was really around collaboration. The other one, I think, is really asking whether we share some common characteristics and what the possibilities are. So I think it is very important that we do share common characteristics. I think we do indeed share common characteristics. So the sort of, just to take an example, the sort of products that in China have been developed for poor producers, let's say in transforming metals, in bashing metals, or in sewing clothes, cheaper sewing machines, more robust machines, etc., that are appropriate to Chinese conditions, also very appropriate to African conditions, because developing countries face similar problems, lack of a single power, of a reliable power supply, for example, might be just one example. So the products that are produced in China or India or elsewhere have application elsewhere in third world countries. And so I think that there's lots of room for collaboration on exactly those sorts of issues. And I think through the BRICS, for example, we're starting to see some forms of collaboration across national boundaries emerging, although I think there's lots of room for more than that.
But it does need people working with people to articulate what their main problem is, because we may perceive the major problem to be interrupted power supply, but for all we know, their priority problem might be something completely different.
Absolutely. So the engagements of the end users is absolutely critical in all of this. So I think there is some context dependency. I mean, the issues in Africa are somewhat different from China or India, but there are some very common problems met in all these three countries. So I think we will see, and we are starting to see, more collaboration across boundaries of a South-South type, which I think are very important, because we've always thought about this North-South, but South-South is very important and I think is rapidly growing. And I'm hoping through the BRICS process we'll see more of that. But of course, engagement with Europe or the United States, the developed countries and developing countries, remains very, very critical, And I think in a lot of areas, but particularly if you think about advanced electronics and all these areas, the more high-tech, more high-science areas, the application of those into issues that are of concern to developing country consumers and producers are very important. So in medical technologies, for example, where we are starting to see some very important new developments, products that are maybe 10% of previous cost, much more robust. These frequently involve engagement between researchers in developing countries and developed countries. So if you look, for example, even at the patent score, which is not necessarily a very good indicator, but more and more patents are co-invented between the developed countries and the developing countries. And that kind of collaboration, these are global issues. And I think that we need to have much more fora to share those and much more common platforms between developed and developing countries and within the developing country context as well.
And of course, we're beginning to see, aren't we, reverse innovation, by which I mean, in Africa, for instance, much more advanced, you could argue, in telecoms than we are in Europe. You know, telecoms is used for mobile phone and mobile technologies are much more advanced because they've kind of jumped the step of landlines. So there are lots of things that are now coming the other way.
No, absolutely, and I think you're right. I think that the emerging markets often don't have the inherited old legacy technologies. Sometimes allows those jumps to happen. And if you look around and you ask yourself, one of the things that I think distinguishes today from where we were 20 years ago is how many powerful corporations with leading technologies from southern countries are now engaged in the European and the United States context. And how is that happening and why is that happening? Well, they become very effective at innovators in their own domestic markets, which they understand much better than the corporates from developed countries do. And on the strength of that innovation, on the strength of innovating for their consumers, they can take their products elsewhere. So some of the products that are developed in emerging markets today are very great consequence to poorer people in Europe and the United States, of whom, of course, there are still many. And there's a large market there, I think, for more robust, cheaper products that emerge from emerging markets and that are of importance to poorer consumers, even in the developed countries.
I mean, Rob, we're already seeing diagnostics, fantastically innovative, paper-based diagnostics developed by George Whitesides and his group at Harvard. And this is sort of where you're using microfluidics so that you have a tiny piece of paper and it does several tests at once and they cost, what, less than $1, something like that? But actually that innovation is, aimed at developing countries, is now having a huge impact the other side of the fence, as it were. How important is that innovation in the involvement of people and the drive that's coming from there? How important is that involvement there?
No, I think it's key, actually. For many years, and particularly many scientists, the focus is often on just coming up with a technology that's going to cure something. And there's been a growing realization that, in actual fact, it's all about implementation and that last mile. In terms of reverse innovation, just an example that I can think of, which is I think quite an interesting case where certainly in Europe and North America, we're very used to seeing incubators for newborn babies, which are quite complicated pieces of machinery. They have a number of different channels and all sorts of technical kit that actually needs quite an experienced person to actually operate it. But in Bangladesh, they were able to develop a machine which had just an on and an off button, and it worked. It was able to survive power cuts and those types of things. And then GE Electric have taken that and produced a version which they were able to sell in Europe, and it's become their top seller in Central Eastern Europe. And that really is reverse innovation, because it actually stripped right back to what was necessary, something that was robust, something that was affordable. So I think that actually, to me, is very interesting, this idea that there is innovation all around the world, but there is innovation certainly in the low and middle income countries, which will have an impact where we are in Europe and North America.
And for instance, using, I know we probably all hate them, but Coca-Cola using their distributed chains for vaccines. Yeah,
the Coca-Cola example is often quoted about how you need to think about social innovation and how you may need to introduce the value chain into some kind of development. And that just means on every incremental step of the distribution, there is the opportunity for people to actually essentially make a living, to make a small amount of money. But that money allows the distribution, and this is particularly for oral rehydration tablets, that a device, a box essentially was designed that would sit on top of the crate of Coca-Cola and would sit therefore on the distribution network of Coca-Cola, which meant, frankly, I've been everywhere, and you can't go anywhere in the world where you can't buy Coke, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you sit. But this sits on top of that, and therefore, again, it was really thinking about the very real and quite crafted ways that companies are able to get their products right penetrate very, very deep into the market. And so in a sense, within the public sector and within development, we actually need to embrace those ideas and that innovation. And I think, it's a good example of how you can combine the two areas for a social benefit and a social need. I think just speaking to something that Dave was talking about in the area that I'm working on, which is financing and financing of R&D, we are very used to thinking in a kind of very traditional sort of donor and recipient model, and we've almost got sort of caught in that. But on product development and for health products, one of the things we're working on now is if we had a pooled funding arrangement, which means that many people, I'm talking about governments here, can join together with contributions that could then stimulate and catalyse product development for affordable, effective and available drugs, diagnostics and vaccines. Then we have a mechanism which, in a sense, can supplement and encourage this R&D where we've got no markets, where we know that commercially driven R&D just will not provide a response. And already what we're seeing, interestingly, is that the first member states that are interested in that, we've had resources in from Brazil, from South Africa, and from India. And I think that's incredibly exciting. They're not large sums of money, but a pooled fund means the entry level is quite reasonable. But it means everyone can share the risk, and at the end of the day, research is a risk. You're funding, to be honest, mostly you're funding failure, and you need to cover that cost. But it also allows for shared benefit, coming together for these types of global problems. And so sharing the risk and sharing the benefit. Now the focus for that financial mechanism was very much these drugs and diseases which won't affect us here, but for those populations, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, throughout Asia, where the population is poor, the burden of disease is high, but it's not something that's going to spread. And so there's no real market. Now that sounds like something that's very important, but elsewhere. And yet, something that will affect all of us, and is affecting all of us right now, is antibiotics and antibiotic resistance. And the same situation is starting to reveal itself in that there isn't really a market, a commercial market. Either because when a product hits the market, resistance comes in very quickly, and so there isn't the opportunity to recoup some of the R&D costs.
In those situations, are people, because there's a huge need for innovation in that particular area, but there's also a need for social innovation, because the thing that happens with antibiotics is that they then get sold in half doses and they're counterfeited. Would not the involvement of people from all those various regions affected, how are they involved, and how could RRI be applied to that particular situation?
Well, I think, I mean, again, I think when we think about research, it's a wide spectrum of different types of activities, and certainly when it comes to the responsible use of antibiotics, it's something that we all have a part to play. It's not just the prescribing from clinicians. I think all of us need to be very aware, and therefore, so some of it is around education and engagement. I think some of it also, again, it comes back to the idea of having simple, easy to use and point of care diagnostics.
I want to focus you on the involvement of.
Yeah, well, I think the involvement is very much in the case of it's understanding disease. It is an education process as much as an involvement. I think the design of a new antibiotic has to be able to operate within the environment for where it's
and that
sent.
Speaks to the involvement of people.
Exactly.
And you were talking, Sachin, about distributive justice and how important that is. And something Rob said touched that point about there needing to be value and an income for people all along the distribution chain rather than at one end of that. Presumably that's something that you'd be keen to see.
Yeah, sure. I think the situation that has arisen in most of the emerging economies because of the rapid economic growth is this huge inequality. And that inequality has multiplied in the last couple of years. As a result, access to technology is confined to some elite. And technology development is confined to specific firms, which are selling it off at a very high price. So in order to achieve that, what I described as need for distributive justice, that is where the role of RRI comes in. And how you prioritize in terms of innovation, how you prioritize in terms of access, and how you prioritize in terms of ensuring equity when you decide the R&D budgetary allocations by the government, and of course through collective efforts like the one that Rob just described.
I was just thinking, we've got some questions here. I was just thinking about washing machines. I'm just going to ask any woman at random. Divna, how many programs do you use on your washing machine?
2 or 3.
Yeah, excuse me. If you had women involved in the design of washing machines, they would only have 3 settings. Men design them, and they have 45 programs. So there's a question over here. Let's go. Sorry, that was a terribly sexist remark, but I'm not ashamed.
I was just wondering if I, as a man, had asked that. Yeah. So Alex, Professor of Science Communication in Germany, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask a question. Well, we're privileged to coordinate a project now in the most recent SPOFS call, which is expected to take forward the Go4 project results and others from FP7 projects. And methodologically, we're also taking a comparative approach, an intercultural, transcultural approach, with 24 partners from Africa, Asia, and Europe. And that is why I'm particularly interested, if I may take us back from the product level, from the antibiotics and so on, to the project level, as to your experiences, how you managed to deal with avoiding the impression down when entering the so-called developing countries. Let's say, here comes the white man from Brussels, trying and failing to explain to people down south how apparently responsibility in research and innovation is supposed to look like. In terms of mutual learning, yeah, how did you manage that challenge?
Doris,
as you can probably tell, in the Progress project, we managed simply by including all major emerging economies, and we always had. It never actually came up in our project that there could be inequality or white people telling other people what to do. And I think just the question not arising is the most important thing. But I'm sure other people on my panel of equals have something to say on how to do it if somebody
who would
indeed
like to
comes.
tackle that? One of you tackle that.
Wait, just
Okay.
okay. Well, we have these issues as well. I think we've reflected on the first time that we tried to bring the RRI in Borneo. The innovation system reflecting at various levels, it can be very complex on that context because in Malaysia, I think most developing nation is not actually equal. When we talk about science, technology, advancement, of course, there's actually a field of threat coming in and so on. But, at the level of, again, about engagement, inclusivity, dialogues, that's actually where we actually attain even up to the most difficult, even up to the policymaker. We actually managed to convince them, to actually see the benefit, even up to the articulation, up to the extent that they can serve as a reflection. So I guess we just have to put that first step, to go through this. Of course, it's actually a lot of challenge that you have to pass through, but there's actually always a way as long as we have a lot of dialogues, engagement, like what is actually being propagated through the RRI dimension or context. So that's my response. Yeah.
Okay. So there was a question here and one over there. So let's start here. And who are you, sir?
I'm Gilles Saint-Martin. I'm from CIRAD in France. CIRAD is a research center working on agriculture for developing countries. So we have a lot of collaboration with South Africa, with Malaysia, with India, with the Philippines as well, and other countries. So I just want to return to the discussion we had before. And some panelists mentioned distributed justice, equity. Some other mention voice of the people. When we are talking about RRI, I'm just asking myself, what is at stake? Is it that, or is it really democracy? In many countries, democracy principle is not so much respected. I'm just asking myself, is it applicable? Is RRI applicable on country where democracy is still far from being respected? It's not only developing countries, it could happen in developed countries as well. We can see the discussion today we have in Europe or we have in the USA, and sometimes if the society is going in that direction, I'm just asking myself, would that be applicable?
Let's ask that question. Who's going to tackle that one? I'm going to go to the political science. You're a political scientist, aren't you? So is it possible, is RRI possible in a country which is not a democracy?
Well, from what I understand of democracy, I think you cannot really be, you cannot really have accountable, responsible, equitable, responsive products, research, and innovation if the people are silent, are afraid, are not participating in crucial decision making, which to me is essentially what democracy is.
So there you are, you've got your answer. Thank you for that. Let's hear first.
Marianne de Blonde from VITO. VITO is a Flemish technological research organization, and since a few months I'm coordinator of an RRI project, Horizon 2020 RRI project. I have a question to Professor Weckert. You told us that recently in Australia there was a new document describing the innovation policy, and that this document stresses commercialization and collaboration with industry. I was wondering whether from within the research and innovation community in Australia, they feel the need to open up this document to public debate, whether this is really what responsible research and innovation is about. And the second question is, would you consider it to be part of the responsibility of responsible research and innovation to urge politicians to open up the debate to the aims of research and innovation?
Okay, let's...
Is my question clear?
Yeah. If I haven't forgotten the first part. The second part is part of RRI to actually convince the policymakers, the politicians and so on that it is important. I think the answer to that is clearly yes. Why it isn't included, I think, is sort of historical. we've had some interesting political situations in Australia in the last few years, and up until very recently, although the same party is still in power, we've had a change in prime ministers, and the previous under the previous Prime Minister, there was very little discussion about science and innovation or technology or anything like that. The focus was more on, getting money from mining coal and selling it and whatnot. The new Prime Minister has brought in now, or focused the discussion a lot more on science and technology and innovation, but to date, there hasn't been this sort of ethical or RRI aspect to it. Hopefully that will come. I mean, the research funding bodies have a list of things that constitute good research and so on. A lot of those are ethical things, the standard ones like, not rigging your data and all of that sort of thing, but that's general everywhere, I guess. But we haven't had that focus on RRI in Australia to date. I think we should, and it certainly doesn't seem to be a high priority in the current document that has just come out.
I mean, what you're really speaking to there is actually the need for, yes, the bottom-up approach, as you're all illustrating, is terribly important, but actually you do need some top-down influence in terms of, putting a stamp of approval on something.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and there was a question there, Roger. Just briefly, if you would.
Sorry, okay. My question follows on the question of the professor behind me here, talking about the silent voice of those in undemocratic countries. So that's clearly a challenge which is ongoing for RRI.
And of course there are silent voices in democratic countries
okay,
too, let's not forget.
I just wanted to refer to another silent voice which came out of the challenge that Robert Madeline gave yesterday. And he talked about, it came under the question, shall we close the Cartesian dream? And how are we counting with the silent voice of nature? And Tim mentioned it, of course, with regard to climate change. It's a massive sea change in the world's perspective as it's trying to acknowledge where does the voice of nature fit in. And as we're all committing to action on climate change, how is that voice of nature being heard in RRI? And the way he put the question was, he said, how do we count with nature? It's the planet, not ourselves. So communicating with communities, of course, and people is very, very important, and it's actually the essential part of RRI. But the question, I don't know if anyone would like to comment on it, is how do we also comment on
poverty? Naturally, you want to get out of poverty. Actually, the planet, frankly, is a long way down your list of priorities.
Yes. So we're talking about the future generations. If we don't take the voice of the planet in, that's my question.
Sure, because we need to finish. Who's going to tackle that one? Rob.
I'm not going to tackle it, but I'm just going to give
It's a whole conference in itself.
So one of the pieces of work that TDR is supporting is in 5 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and traditionally we're focused on health, but this is a project which brings together agriculture, water resources, climate, and how that impacts on malaria. And so, in a sense, the project is really what we call community-based innovation, where it's the community that's measuring the temperature change, the malaria incidence, and those types of things, and feeding that data into a central database using mHealth technology, mobile phone technology. The database is held in South Africa. But all of this is trying to bring together for the community at their level how that level of climate change is impacting them. I mean, I don't think it's answering your question at a sort of planetary level, but I do think it illustrates that we need to think about that type of inclusivity and community-centered research, but it needs to be at all levels. I mean, I think it's a real challenge once you get to some of the areas where I work in, where you're really negotiating things between governments. You have to hope that by dealing with the government, you're dealing with the aggregated voice of the country. I mean, I know that's a very optimistic and sometimes naive hope, but that's what we have to work with, of course. And until we have an alternative approach, then I think that's going to be the big challenge. But I don't think it negates some of these grassroots and bottom-up things in the same
So
time.
we live in an imperfect world. You've shown us a way to move towards a better world through RRI. She's raising her eyebrows here. Very expressive eyebrows. But thank you so much, all of you. It's been a joy to hear from you. And I hope that all of you will take the opportunity to talk to these folk during the coffee break, because there's so much more that they have to tell you, and which will be enormously informative to us all. So please, would you thank them? Okay, so if I could ask all of you to leave now. That's it, you're off, go away. And our next session is the evolution of RRI, the way forward. And what we're going to get is, we're going to get someone from each of the Go4 groups to come and just give us their thoughts. And then it's for you to decide where we're going to go with all of this. Michael, I'm going to start with you because you seem the most organised. Okay.
That's because I didn't move.
So what we're going to hear now is each of them are going to give just a really short statement, she says, giving them a glare, a short statement on what the way forward is. And then we'll all think about this together. So from each of the points of view. So for progress, Michael, what are your thoughts?
As I listened to the discussion yesterday, it seemed that a lot of people wanted to continue doing case studies, preliminary research on RRI, and wait for more information. My feeling is that you have enough information to begin experimenting with standards, and that the way forward is to begin writing procedures for RI, trying to institutionalize it in various ways, and seeing what goes wrong, of which, my opinion, based on experience with broader impacts in the US, is a great deal will go wrong, but you'll learn from it. And the preliminary research can go on indefinitely and therefore not produce much. So my recommendation is start writing standards, start beginning procedures. For example, in response to Peter's question yesterday, the best question all day, I thought, was, for me, was to begin thinking about dissertation defenses. If the people who do the examination were required to ask several questions about RI in the examination, then his advisor, his supervisor, would begin to think about ways to include a little bit of RI in the program so that he doesn't flunk the exam. And that's a relatively small change in procedures which might have a major impact. And I think that's the kind of thing we should be thinking about now. That's what I have to say.
Okay, so I can summarise, stop planning, get on with it.
Yes.
Perfect. I'm now going to go to, Francesca, also from Progress.
Would you like a statement for the way forward?
Yeah.
Well, I will be shorter than Michael. I think that on the implementation side, I will maybe say something on the same line, but just on the implementation line, I think that would be very useful if we would start thinking about which are the examples that are not RRI, because it would give more guidance. And I would definitely appreciate to see more involvement from the innovators group, not just the policymakers, not just the researchers. Of course, the importance of the society, civil societies, end users, representatives, and so on. But I think I still miss the voice of the innovators. I still miss the involvement of industry and everybody that is designing products and services for the end users and societies. So for me, this should be the way forward.
Okay, so a greater involvement with industry because we're lacking their voice at the moment. Okay, so Robert for GREAT.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Michael was saying. It's like trying to promote measures that, institutional measures that could promote responsible approaches. And I would say, for me, responsible approaches are approaches that favor dialectic between or among different positions in order to develop third positions. Because this could, first of all, increase the functionality of technologies of research and innovation, trying to gather knowledge, but also will protect moral perspectives. So for me, the way forward is to unveil the values at stake in when it comes to research and innovation, because as someone present in the room today would say, no technology is ever value free. So the important thing is to unveil it and to start playing with it, start coping with different values at stake in order to promote new issues, new technologies, new innovations that could have a beneficial impact for society.
Okay, thank you. Stefan for Resagora.
Thank you. The many ideas that have been put forward with the concept of responsible research and innovation are not brand new. In many respects, efforts to cope with issues of impacts of research and innovation in society have been around for quite a while already. Certainly in advanced economies and related institutional political systems, we have all kinds of regulations, codes of conduct, standards, norms, professional orientation that in one way or the other have been trying to cope with risks, with danger, with expectations of all kinds, positive and negative, vis-à-vis research and innovation. Having said that, still the present move towards dedicated, conscious, responsible research and innovation is an important one because it tries to advance, to further develop and advance this heritage legacy that is around there. My point is, we should not say, now let's go forward, but rather look around and understand what kind of institutional systems already do exist in research and innovation, and try to build whatever we do on this, or try to reform and change existing systems where necessary, if necessary even radically, but do that then consciously. That's exactly the reason why we, in our project, came up with the development, the design of some 10 principles of how doing that, how to consciously reflect on the existing structures and procedures to advance them. And there's a lot, of course, that can be advanced, can be improved, that has become visible very much in this conference, not at least in the fantastic first session we had this morning with the representatives of the various non-European countries. So there's a lot to do, a lot to learn, but the point is we should do that in a reflexive, conscious manner. We need some orientation, guidelines for that purpose, for in the end, in an institutional transformation of research and innovation systems globally.
Okay. Responsibility then, Elena.
Good morning to everybody again. I would like to say some that complements with the comments of my colleagues here. We didn't invent the wheel with responsible research and innovation. This concept has been for 1,000 years now. Even when Prometheus gave the fire to the people, which was an innovation at the time, there was the consciousness of what this fire should be done. So I wouldn't say that the way forward is nothing more than let's go ahead, meaning that now we have so many burning issues around us, from cloning to stem cells to biotechnologies to nanotechnologies to security technologies. So I would say let's try to implement at the best way we can responsible research innovation through our policies affecting research, but furthermore, trying to have these policies in the market. So far, from what we have seen, at least in the last years that we are working on the area of responsible research innovation in different projects, market has no idea. Industry does not know anything about responsible research innovation. They have other initiatives like corporate social responsibility, etc., but they don't have this policy, this concept, which is more broad and has many dimensions. We have, for our understanding now, 6 keys, but in general, keys and dimensions are emerging. So I would say that it is the time, we have the tools, we have the knowledge, maybe partial knowledge, but we must act. We must try to give answers to all these things that are happening and we are falling behind conceptually and socially. Thank you.
Okay, Philippe from Great.
Thanks. We talk from bottom-up approach, we talk from inclusiveness, and I think we talk very few related to who is making innovation. And I think it's one of the keystone of responsible innovation is education, capacitation of the civil society and the industry, because if we stay at the abstract level, responsible innovation approach will never be compulsory. It's like ethics in a way. You have a normative horizon, but your relationship with the normative horizon is a choice. It's not something that you can oblige people. So I think from this point of view, we need to have a new curricula, a new way of approaching and teaching science to develop consciousness related to ethics and to value. So I think there is an urgent need to think in a different way the education of scientists and engineers and at the industry level. That's it.
So, first of all, I want to... Who have we got from industry here? Right. Do you know, you're going to be my first port of call. Because one of the things that I've been very conscious of as we've been going along is actually that we haven't got involvement of industry. Where are you? Where are you from?
I am the general manager of 2 companies. One is Innovatech, consulting company, and other is a biotech company.
And what do you think of all of us talking about this?
Okay, it is...
I'll protect you.
I have how to say, an idea. Research and innovation are quite clear different issues in theoretical point of view, from theoretical point of view. And till now, there are not clear connection from theoretical point of view again. Then it's very difficult to merge the concept of responsibility of research, what could be public or industry related, and innovation, which is mostly industry related. Mix all these things is very complex. This is my first idea here. Next, I also fully agree that there is a need of more representation from industry associations, in companies, big companies, small companies, and just to reinforce the theoretical aspect, not only theoretical, but the implementation aspect of RRI in Europe, is my perception.
Okay, and over here, let's hear from you. With yet another beautiful bow tie.
My name is Joachim von Heimberg. I'm working in a boutique consultancy helping companies to innovate how they innovate. If I summarize the discussion from yesterday today, I think the sentence would be, who can does, who cannot teaches, and the people who are doing have no time to come here because they believe the discussion is not at a stage which is specific and relevant enough to impact on what they do. Because innovation, as my colleague said, is not the same as research, and it's about applying knowledge to create value. And that is where the connection to society and to the bigger realm happens, which is what are values, what are the norms, and how to handle risks associated with that. And that's what industry is looking for. Industry is not interested necessarily in finding another process or another system or another way of doing research. There is research done inside industry, outside industry, but that's not the issue for industry. The issue for industry is how do you de-risk innovation versus the external stakeholders? Because industry will innovate because they have to. The issue they have is not how to innovate, but how to make sure that the innovations create value, society values, and therefore make profit.
And of course, there's enormous concern that in Europe we have an incredibly risk-averse population.
Absolutely.
That's going to say no to every new technology.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and that's why research is so kind of a peaceful place, because research doesn't mean you change anything. You just mean you learn how you could change it if you would come around and do it.
Okay. Where's Monica? Monica's there. Monica, shout out because you're lurking at the back.
Yes. Monica Schofield.
Look at the snow behind her. Look.
I'm the convener of a task force for responsible innovation under the auspices of the European Industrial Research Management Association. So I have to say the statement that industry is not doing anything about this is absolutely wrong. But it possibly doesn't call it RRI. Firstly, these are companies who are getting involved. These are companies with major industrial research and innovation activities in Europe who are concerned about some of the issues, and are as Joachim, who is a member of the task force, mentioned, are addressing this. It's in a slightly parallel universe, because the industry deals with content, it deals with actual decisions, and a lot of this is at a much more abstract level. If you want evidence of industry's thinking around these topics, I would point to Vision 2050, which was run by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's an industry-driven vision that says in 2050 we'll have 9 billion people on the planet. What do we need to do so that 9 billion people can live well and within the means of the planet? There is an industry roadmap produced by some 25 top companies showing a way to a better world. And it has inspired many companies that are involved in this task force to change the way they do business. This is going on, but I don't think the community here in this room seems to be aware of it. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a challenge there. Michael, do you want to come back on that? Yes. Because there is a danger that there's a parallel conversation.
Actually, my impression of the yesterday was that I was at two conferences. When you put together innovative research and innovation, you've actually put together, somebody pointed out yesterday, things that usually are kept separate. One way to think of it is, what is the EU's funding agencies going to do for universities and other researchers in the grant-making process? That's one discussion. And the other is, what is Europe going to do with innovation?
I think for the purposes of this conversation, let's stick to the latter one. What is Europe going to do with innovation?
Well, I think that that discussion is probably been way too narrow. When the U.S. people write books about innovation in the U.S., which is all I know, is that most important thing for innovation are big, attractive cities that bring people together in close proximity, in places where the rent is low and the educational level high and there's a lot of unemployment. that gets innovation. Boston was a depressed area until the 1950s, when it became the center of American computers. Seattle was not a very wealthy place until Microsoft moved there.
And it always rained.
It's no worse than here. And then San Francisco is an attractive city for a long time for its weird people. And the weird people, some of the weird people are artists, but some of them are tech engineers. And they did things that nobody expected, and it became popular. There are other stories. Most of the stories are a failure. And I think one of the problems with, if Europe is risk averse, I personally can't tell. But I'll take the word if they're risk averse, then that is a problem, because innovation is mostly about failure. The successes are few. And most of the people who have had these big successes have a list of a dozen or so big failures first. So I think the discussion, if you're interested in innovation in Europe, you've got to think in terms of cities where people congregate and have good ideas, places where they're able to get money to take risks, and that's risking other people's money, and that's the discussion. I think the discussion, RRI, the narrow discussion, is the one which is actually manageable for making changes. And if you have graduates who have some idea of innovation process, you have a better chance of having them congregate in cities and do innovative work.
But I think the issue here is not that, where the innovation does or how it gets done, but so much that it has to be inclusive, or else when the innovation eventually appears, it's rejected by society or has unintended consequences.
I think you're going to get unintended consequences. That's life. You can try to control them, limit them, and so on. That's about the best you can do. Again, I'm speaking as American. We just take risks. Too many, in my opinion, but that's us. I think the focus here, the question you want, do you want a manageable question or do you want an interesting question? The manageable question, I think we can work out ways of improving the educational system in Europe so that the graduates of the universities are more likely to do the sort of things that in the US were done by graduates of universities, or in a number of cases, including Apple, by dropouts. I mean, that's one of the number of the big innovations in technology have been done by people who went to the university, stayed there for a couple of years, decided there wasn't any good, there was nothing more they wanted to learn, and then went off and made $1 billion. Now they didn't do RRI, and I think some of the products would have been better had they paid more attention to possible consequences. But that's innovation.
Okay, so I can feel there's a lot of conversations now coming out. So.
I just want to raise a point that's slightly off kilter, but I think it's a sort of elephant in the room, and it's about the sort of overarching social order. And I think I'm really sort of coming back to something that Tim said at the end of the last session about repressive regimes, and the question was raised over there about, to what extent is the sort of democratic characteristics of a society related to whether RRI gets any traction or not. And I think it was also said that we shouldn't delude ourselves in the West that we're overly democratic just because we have ballots every now and again. And I think I want to raise the question that, and it does feed into what people have said about, education, but for me it's not so much about can we change the curricula in terms of content, it's can we change the process of how we socialise our citizens into a much more deliberative, dialogic democracy that would then render them much more able to capitalise on opportunities to be involved in a proper democratic way where their voice is actually heard.
Okay, so
but just the one thing that I haven't said, just want to finish.
He's from Liverpool, sorry.
Yeah, is that I want to pose the question that would work better if society was ordered more cooperatively rather than competitively. And within that, universities are part of the problem, because it seems to me that the universities that I know in the West bank their resources, and those resources get bigger and bigger, and they sit in a bank. And if we worked cooperatively, maybe we'd get innovation and research findings to the world quicker, rather than keeping ideas competitively within institutions or small research groupings. So I want to ask, the room or the panel whether we need to be thinking about
kind of quite a big question.
Cooperation rather than competition.
Yes, cooperation. But what I'm interested in is practical next steps. So if I gave you a magic wand, what would the practical next steps be?
In the UK, we spend more than £1 billion on evaluating the research quality of university research activity. It wraps up the time of all the academics that I know massively, and it doesn't really more than marginally change the settlement in terms of how research monies are allocated. Why can't we allocate research monies to cooperative groupings on big questions that the public ask us to research?
Okay, in your dreams about the $1 billion spent on REF, but anyway, what, Elena, you want to come back on that? Is that someone from the home of democracy?
If I could have a dream that I could do things immediately and very easily, for instance, for responsible research and innovation, I would try to monitor the most important dimensions it has. So I could have a tool as a policymaker, for instance, and as society as well, because it should be transparency, how responsible research and innovation aspects, dimensions, keys are doing in real environments. As I said, there's no responsible research and dimension, responsible research and innovation notion in the industry, because we don't call it responsible research and innovation. In truth, I don't care how we call it, but I would like this concept to be implemented everywhere. And I would be happy to monitor, because only what is measured could be done and could become better. That's my opinion.
Okay. Support for that? Parry.
Support for that, but also continuing on this puzzle about the role of industry and its representation in meetings like this. I've been working on nanotechnology and society for quite some years as part of both the national consortium and European level networks of excellence. And there we have done a lot of work together with firms, small firms, big firms, and looking very closely at specific areas of nanotechnology and their possible evolution over time, which led to strategic reflection of the various people in those strategic workshops. And so we have a lot of experience there. And we could say, okay, this is the sort of thing that you can actually productively do together with firms and stakeholders from society. But then, and perhaps in line with what you were saying, we actually at one moment introduced the notion of responsible research and innovation in this work. We were actually the first people have documented, but we then left it again because it didn't help us very much in the concrete activities that we had. And so one of my suggestions would be for the way forward, and perhaps it is in the mind of some of the people at the table there in the panel, is to perhaps drop the term responsibility or responsible, because it is important very much, because it offers occasion to broaden up things. On the other hand, it can very easily be a red herring, and you can get stuck in the discussions about responsibility and responsible. And so instead of that, you could do certain good things. And our work, which is called constructive technology assessment, would be one example, and a number of other examples that we have seen here. So let's go and do that, somewhat independent from all these puzzles about responsible research and innovation. Final line, when we do constructive technology assessment, we also always say it's not just the concrete cases and interactions, but we have an overall idea of the importance of better technology in a better society. That's our slogan. And I think that's just as good and perhaps better than responsible research and innovation.
Any thoughts on that, panel?
I would like to ask, what would you propose instead? All the binding elements in the word responsible and responsibility that are meant to guide somehow innovation. We are now talking about responsible research and innovation because most of the innovation done so far has been created a need to stop the danger of specific products, technology, services. I don't know. We can talk about this for ages. So I'm not against this. I understand how complicated it is to actually find concrete guidelines, especially for industry, for those that are actually working on innovation. But I wonder if we drop the term responsibility, aren't we leaving out too much? What would you propose instead? Something that can be more operational instead of this concept, but something else?
Well, from my own background, it would be focus on the technology and its embedding in society. And that's how we actually have organized the next steps in our projects in the Dutch consortium on nanotechnology. And so the concrete thing would be, well, the responsible research and innovation has been important now in actually to focus on particular organizations and their role in research and innovation, in a better technology.
So what's the word you'd use rather than responsibility?
Do you need a word?
Yes.
Well, basically, I would say the important thing is the change in institutions. And if they change in a good way, it could be research funding organizations, it could be research programs, the big consortia that we've been working with. If they change with a sort of ideal of inclusive innovation, would be a good possibility.
So you think inclusive innovation is a better title than responsible innovation?
No, it's not better. It's if you want to do concrete things and have a way forward, then it directs you to do good things. While at the moment, responsible research and innovation directs you to puzzle about what it could be.
Okay. Anybody, hands up if you have a support for that view. Parry, you're on your own.
No.
There's some support.
Well, it's not exactly... Sorry, Malcolm Fisk, de Montfort University. It's not exactly support for that particular vision, because I don't want, and I don't think you want us to get bogged down in a discussion about what responsibility is. But it comes back to Elena's point that there's a particular mindset, an ethical mindset, if you like, that I guess that we would all agree that we would like to see in place amongst industrialists, amongst all those people concerned with research and innovation. So yes, and on the issue of inclusiveness, maybe the issue of inclusiveness is less important than that ethical mindset, because inclusiveness would come with that ethical mindset once we have it in place. Now, in terms of practical steps to how we can bring this about, I wanted to pick up on what Stefan said, because he is the one, to me, that has mentioned most frequently the issue of standards. And quite clearly there is an issue about how standards are developed, how they are rolled out. There are certainly movements in standards that take us away from particular products and things and telling us how to do things, more towards the development of frameworks, looser frameworks within which there is an ethical and a moral standpoint that can guide us in the things that we do and in the innovation that takes place. So certainly I'd be interested to hear a bit more from Stefan perhaps about how we pick up on this agenda to take things forward through potentially the use of standards, but not standards necessarily as we have known them in the past, which are somewhat rigid and somewhat prescriptive, but standards that do relate to the kind of themes, the kind of issues that we are very much concerned about here.
And what you've raised particularly, Stefan, is that you talked about that a lot of these kind of standards already exist. And so the the possibility is that you go along to a company and you talk about RRI and they say, but it's already there. There are already all those things. So is there a way that you need to distinguish but pull in all those other things so that you're not presenting RRI as something, a completely new kid on the block, but as actually an evolution of what's been there in the past?
Exactly. Evolution is the key notion here. That's, by the way, if you'll take a closer look at this thing, we didn't use the notion of RRI. We speak about responsibility, Ari, that's true, but not RRI as the notion that is quite fashionable these days. Because there is, as I tried to say, a long-standing tradition in at least, not only in advanced economies actually, from an institutional perspective, from a procedural perspective, to cope with social issues around technology and innovation in various ways. You might say they are not good enough, they can be improved, certainly they cannot be improved. They have to be improved in various ways. We need orientation for that purpose. This orientation, the direction is being renegotiated in societies all the time. None of us will agree, from all over the world, will agree on particular clearly defined targets where we want to go to. I'm sure this is not the case. Rather, we have we need fora where we can debate on this. So having said that, our suggestion, not standards, to pick up what you said, although standards are there, they are very important, but orientations, principles, we called it, on the level where you try to organize the discussion, the discourse, the deliberations that have to happen. And that would, in my view, also help us to overcome this juxtaposition that we had earlier, this discussion about industry and research, those who have to innovate and those who have the freedom of doing what they want to do, also in research. So I think these are juxtapositions which are not true. In industry, it's a wrong assumption, I think, that in so-called industries, it's just the economic orientation that is dominating everything. If you would go back here in history, for instance, of some large companies, you would see that they originated from very social orientation, from ideas about social innovation, some of them at least. So there's always been this overlapping areas, and they continue to exist. We also see the social claims in the most advanced companies like Facebook, or you name them. At least they make very strong social claims, the Googles of this world also. So I think it is a mixed picture that we have to take aboard and to accept. Having said that, for that purpose, it is complex, and we need therefore an agreement on certain procedures, standards, principles, how to organize debates and negotiations of an evolution that will never stop.
Okay. Francesca, and then Robert.
Very quick question. Standards by who and for whom? Can we think about a new body that is going to regulate and create the standards, or can you identify already somebody that will be providing this, and who will be obeying the standards in the group of stakeholders involved in research and innovation?
No time to respond to that in detail and lengthy. Quickly, there are already very many both bodies and orientating frameworks that help to debate about desirability in research and innovation. Starting from them, you can advance the systems and improve them. And that includes then the parliaments, that includes the representations of research organizations, of research professions. We had the example of ERMA, with their committee on responsible research and innovation. That's an organization. This is something coming up from industry. So we have numerous entities already.
We don't need a new body.
We need not necessarily a new body. We need a continued discussion and negotiation and decision making, and at some point probably also global settings for where this can be debated. We saw that this morning how important this is. But we do not need from scratch one new body or so, which would solve all problems. Certainly not.
Robert.
Yeah, I want to say I fully agree with you. It's like juxtaposition between research and innovation is something that wouldn't lead us on a good path. Of course, there are differences, main differences, but they can communicate, I think. No, but I wanted to pick up also on Ari, what Ari was saying, and also on the standards things. Of course, standards are super important, and we have those standards. But for me, it would be reducing the chances that the concept of responsibility embeds in seeing it as a standard, seeing it as something fixed, something that we can always rely on to. This is, in a way, I would say a mistake that we could also do if we interpret like definitions of RRI, the six keys that were developed by the European Commission, as something that is fixed and onto which we can rely as, you know, tick boxing things. I would say responsibility. Responsibility is a practice, it's an exercise. It's not a label. Of course, there is always the risk that responsibility could be used as a label. The thing that in Res Agora I think you call responsibility washing. There's always this risk. François Ewald, for instance, in his book, I don't know if the audience knows it, talked about the usage of responsibility, the political usage of responsibility in the 19th century, about from the French liberals. They wanted to use that as a kind of legitimation, as a keyword in order to develop certain kind of economic purposes. Of course, we can always go down that drift, the neoliberal understanding of responsibility, the individual responsibility. You're responsible for your own fate. But I think there's also another way, and it's the institutional way, it's the intersubjective way. It's the fact that you create institutional measures, are you saying? I think you're perfectly right, but I wouldn't say that responsibility goes against your ideas. I would say responsibility is a fluid kind of concept that can allow us to use it as an exercise. As Stefan was saying, deliberation is an exercise. It's something that would bring up always new things, new issues. But it's not something that we could say, okay, if we respect 1, 2, 3 conditions, then we are responsible. The 6 keys can be interpreted in many ways. Gender, for instance. How do we interpret gender? Do we interpret it only in a mechanical way? We have 50 women, 50 men. Or we say, okay, let's think about how a woman would see this product, as you were saying before about washing machines. Do we make it an exercise of reflexivity, or we just stick to the fact, okay, we have 50 women, we're fine? There's always, you know, a matter of interpretation, and we have to be careful that the concept is not exploited. But the concept itself, I think, embeds a lot of chances, a lot of challenges. That's my perspective.
How will a company say, but how is this different from CSR?
That's an interesting question, because we also analyze CSR. There are hands over there. CSR takes into account these kind of values, as he was saying, for instance, takes into account challenges that imply norms and values. But from my perspective, or from our perspective, let's say, they tend to, first of all, detach themselves from the political dimension. It's them themselves deciding which values to take up, which norms to promote. And perhaps they tend to promote only certain kind of values or perspective, dismissing others. I don't know, there are many examples. Xavier Pavie, for instance, in his book on responsible innovation, talks a lot about, as well, corporate social responsibility, and tells us that there are these huge industries, huge companies, for instance, Starbucks or McDonald's, that develop certain kind of aspects, like the cultivation of coffee in a specific way or whatever. And this is something that we should, of course, be happy of, development in ethical issues. But what if cultivating coffee in certain areas in the shade is not, let's say, doesn't go along with a raise in salaries or in the working conditions or things like that? This is the difference, I would say, that you can find between corporate social responsibility. I'm not talking of all the examples of corporate social responsibility, but this is something that companies themselves decide which value to promote, to pursue, and sometimes they dismiss others that are equally important.
So one of the key points is perhaps to make this for the user a less nebulous concept.
Yeah.
So my name's Anne Roulin. I'm working in research and development. I'm for Nestle. I'm responsible for nutrition and sustainability. And effectively, before Alison came to interview us, we'd never really thought of this in terms of responsible innovation, but we've been working for years in this direction. And it's really anchored in our business principles, which cover consumers, so the whole aspect of inclusivity. And as we operate worldwide, it's really consumers at every level of the economic pyramid. It's our principles around human rights and labour practices, our people, our employees, suppliers and customers, and the environment. And we have commitments externally that we make, and we report on the progress on those every year. But we're also measured on this. We're measured on this by external rating agencies. And maybe these are not the kind of documents that the academic community looks in very much, but they're very, very detailed. The Dow Jones Sustainability Index, for example, we fill in every year. There is about 100 questions in this that cover a whole range of the issues that we've been discussing this morning. We just completed the Access to Nutrition Index. That's the broadest nutritional assessment of what a company does. There's about 500 questions there. And other ones like the Oxfam Behind the Brand scorecard. So we are measured with respect to our competitors, what we're doing on these issues, and the results are publicised. So it's not just...
There are many other measures, FTSE for good. And
FTSE for good, exactly.
Those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Bernard Hebert, I'm Director of Research in CNRS and based in Sciences Po Paris and member of Great Project. I have three proposals to make after our discussion. Why do you laugh? Oh, sorry.
For the snow behind you.
Okay.
So romantic.
With the snow.
Yes.
Finally, we have the snow in this. Okay. So perhaps we have to change the capital of Europe. First, have we to return back before Emile Durkheim, sociologist, with the social division of labor? We thought that in modern society, with a division of labor, it is more efficient. So, that's the first question. The second question is, okay, each sphere, each group, we've spoken about innovators, researchers, civil society organization. They have different responsibilities. And we assume that they are complementaries, but they could be in big and great tensions. So, is it the time to say, okay, perhaps the social division of labor is not good? And why? Do we want to change that? The second point is, okay, we have too many responsibilities. Does it make any change with RRI? Is it possible to integrate RRI as a new kind of responsibilities with the all responsibilities we have, and they are too heavy? That's the second point. And the third one, perhaps it's the question from a philosopher, I'm a bit astonished by our lack of confidence in the conceptual strength of moral responsibility concept. This concept, if we take all the 10 possible meanings, can help you in this journey. And I can, but I have no time perhaps, to do a kind of another possible decalogue, because we have the decalogue from Res Agora, to navigate in RRI in 10 principles. We can navigate in RRI with 10 different meanings of moral responsibilities. For example, just take the question of what are the different roles of the different entities? What are the different, this is the first meaning. The second meaning, what are the different capacities of each institutions? And there we see the differences. The capacities of innovators are not the capacities of the people working in university. And it can be sometimes complementary, but it can be sometimes in great tension. Okay. I stop there because I...
Okay, Bernard, but I'm going to pin you to the ground now and
Yep.
say, what would your first steps towards operationalising or making this a practical proposition that gets taken up?
Answer honestly to your question, because I hate this kind of question. Because, you know, you give me too much power. Too much power. I have to take the decision what we have to do. No, but it's an important point. Okay, we've discussed, we know what is the theory, what can we do practically? But we don't know exactly what it is. But if you give me the power to say we have to do this, you've given me too much power. And it does not work like that in democracy. It does not work like that in philosophy or in every kind of place where people are thinking and are from different opinions. It's not only to know what we will do practically, okay? It's not, you've got my point, it's okay.
Okay. Don't marry a philosopher. Right.
It's an important point.
Okay, all right, then. Okay, so there's one over there, there's Aki. I want to hear from Peter, and there's somebody here. Okay, so Aki the engineer, you have a practical suggestion. Engineers, philosophers.
Yes.
Yes, two different...
Okay.
On a different planet.
Okay, I'll talk now as...
All right.
Okay.
I'm teasing you,
you talked enough now.
And you love it.
Okay, I'm talking now as an engineer, okay, good. I don't know what does it mean. Come from Fraunhofer, and Fraunhofer earns money not only from funding projects, but 40, 60, 50% from industry. That means we are kind of, the industry comes to us and we have them. We make applied research. This is one point. That means I know somehow what the industry needs, and we give it to them. The other thing is, I would like to talk as a father who has 2 children. My daughter is 26, my son is 23. That is young persons, they are coming to the society. So I can see some, mainstreams. At the time of the Genghis Khan or whatever, was very nice to conquer the neighbor, to get rich, to get famous, and who could be in the society famous, not only the kings, but also those who were fighting and killing and taking, and so there could be something important in the society. The next generations who were conquering and taking and so on, the 50s, 60s was important to get rich. So we could have now a lot of things about responsibility, and we all had it and so on. It's not important for me. For me, it's important, this is now an age where young people, a lot of people, have the power, have the means to do something. They can research something, they can have an education, they can do something. And what I think is to give my kids and the next generation a tool when they think that I am responsible for what I am doing. When I do something, it might be something important, and not I'm doing and get my money and then to hell with it. Somebody else is responsible for it. No. And okay, to sum up in technical, practical things, is what we tried to do in this project. It was my dream, actually, to give it to my children. To have kind of a platform where people can talk about it, exchange their minds, have a common understanding, even if they talk about different responsibilities and responsible being things. To have a common platform where we can have some whistleblowers. Whistleblowers, damn it. They can say, anonymous, I'm doing this, this, and this, and I believe this is this, this, and this, and might be like this misused. So this is, my dream is that this platform that we gave can be something that is the observatory, that we will see it. It's kind of a basic platform like Facebook and whatever, a kind of a social network for responsibility, where we have all kind of case studies and whatever, and people have the opportunity and the place to talk what they see, what they hear.
And that's the means by which you drive
yes.
the norm. Okay, Peter.
Thank you for coming back to me. First of all, I take us back to the beginning of the session where Professor Davis said, okay, it's about doing something now, just not more thinking, doing it. And I guess he has a philosophy background as well. This is quite a contrary opinion now.
Now just stop it at the back.
I guess we should start doing something, and I find it a valid point to see what's out there, both on a university level. If we want to introduce responsibility anywhere, well, we can't define it as an overarching system, I guess. It's about seeing what's there wherever we go, and so I think it's about working on the ground level and going to these universities. I'm not really sure about the role of industry yet, where they fit in, but they have to be in there as well. And what I take from the first session we had is to get the society in there, the people that are, in whatever fields it is, are connected to it as well. And I think we shouldn't only do this in Malaysia, and we shouldn't only do this in places we consider the South, but we should also do it in front of our doors. We should do it here as well. And I think this was a major outcome of the first session I would integrate into next steps as well.
Okay, so for instance, you're seeing in universities a lot of universities now have entrepreneurial sessions, some of which actually are obligatory now for students. I mean, certainly that's they're offered now at UCL, for instance, in entrepreneurship. But what you're saying is that actually those entrepreneurship courses should perhaps include people from the community so that you start making it normal for entrepreneurs to include and to be an inclusive involvement of others in the development of their products, or development of their thoughts even.
I guess it's also entrepreneurs if we're researching on or innovating on a certain product that comes after. But I think we have to, and now this is a philosophy question, who are we doing the research for? Who are we addressing? And what does responsibility mean in this context? And if it's for entrepreneurs, yes, of course. If entrepreneurs are connected to this innovation, we have to start at entrepreneurial workshops introducing responsibility. But if we're, for example, researching on climate change, then we have to ask ourselves, it's probably not the entrepreneurs, maybe also we're addressing. But it's then, is it the public or is it policymakers? And then it's also a different approach where to put it. It's more difficult.
Okay, I'm going to take my chance now finally to speak up. And so I'm Alison Loconto from the French Institute for Agricultural Research and the IFRIS group in Paris that's part of the Resagora project. And I wanted to make a comment about the question of standards that has been brought up because I spend all my time thinking about them. So I figured I should say something. And so I've been working on social and environmental standards for quite some time now. And as Stefan had mentioned, these have been around for a very long time. We have a lot of different standards that are out there. The social and environmental standards that, I don't know if you noticed on your coffee, you have 3 of them. Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade, and Organic are all on the coffee that you drink. And so the standards, see, this is a point. The standards do not include quality indicators. They are for very specific values.
Taste indicators.
Exactly. I mean, they're for very specific values. And so what has been done, and I think the point that Francesca made was standards for what and by whom and for whom. These are very important questions because the standards themselves put forward principles and values that you want to kind of be able to ensure that people are using and people are thinking about, but you have to set up a system in order for those standards to actually be applied and used. And that's where what we were doing in Resagora was trying to talk about the institutions that are needed. I mean, for the use of standards, you rarely see a standard or a code of ethics now that doesn't have some sort of audit or certification mechanism. You have accreditation mechanisms to ensure that the auditors are capable of auditing properly in order to make sure that they're implementing a standard or ensuring that the standards are being implemented according to the capacity of the auditor to audit. And you also have some form of communication labels and other sorts of things that are all part of these systems that are able to, that enable the different actors to inform others about what they're doing. And so if we're beginning to think about responsibility, and I think that the term responsibility is still important, because we have, in these systems, you have different responsibilities that different actors take on. Different types of actors can be involved in these systems. Public actors are involved, private sector is involved, and the civil society is involved. They all have different roles and responsibilities. And what we're trying to encourage in terms of how we treated the question of responsible research and innovation was becoming responsive to each other. And so ensuring this more collaborative approach to thinking through what you're being responsible for, what values it is that you are putting forward in your research and innovation process. And from my experience working on standards, there aren't really standards that address, existing right now, that address research and innovation processes per se in what currently exists. They're addressing products, they're addressing production processes mostly, addressing kind of traceability through value chains, things like this. But outside of, within kind of this industrial sphere, you have a number of standards that are being used that enable industry to show that they're being responsible. And in the professions, in science, in research, you have standards that are used that are part of professional societies, that scientists who are working in industry still comply with the ethical standards of the sciences that they're part of. And so you have a number of things existing, but it's how to get them responding to each other in systems and through processes. And that's what we're trying to kind of promote and talk about in terms of the concept of responsible research and innovation. So,
okay, thank you very much. Anyone want to respond to that? Elena?
Yes, I would say that we have, let's say, not a common understanding in the room. When we talk about responsible research and innovation, the notion of it, as it is a policy from the European Commission that started, it is only about research and innovation. It does not go to anything in the organization. For instance, it does not apply to existing products that they do have standards and all this. The idea, the way that we have to think about responsible research and innovation, at least as it is right now described, it is about the new innovative products that companies or perhaps research organizations produce. This is a concept that is framed. So the risk is when, as Michael said, when we are talking about innovation. So the risk, as Europeans, yes, we are conservatives in general, so we want to undermine risks. But if you want real innovation, like, for instance, USA, you cannot avoid to take risks. You must take risks. So what we are trying to do is trying to have a way to build the ecosystem so an innovator could go forward. An innovator could find a way to go through bureaucracy, to go through resistance in a way that is economical. The company should not spend so much money to persuade that something is good, and also in a way that could give birth to new innovation. This is the idea, this is the ideal as well of responsible research and innovation. All the other notions we had so far, the theoretical frames, etc., like corporate social responsibility, it's for the whole organization. They goes to every aspect of the work, from the human resources they have to the product that they build. So this is something that it is different. In principle, now, if we want to go forward, as the responsibility concept is really sexy concept, and everybody wants this to have a share of this concept. You see, if you are a housewife, you talk to your husband and you say, take the responsibility of the children, take responsibility of the garbage to go down. So
everybody wants to take a part of this notion of responsibility, but we are not talking about this. We are talking about responsibility in innovation. So we need standards, we need policies that they don't forbid innovation in the end, but they create an ecosystem that innovation could evolve. This is the idea, and this is the concept that we must, in a way, protect from misunderstandings.
So it allows safe innovation, effectively.
Nothing can be safe in this world.
Go and disagree with that. It's not a good choice of words, but it allows a more assured.
What I think is that innovation, it's like 500 years ago, when an innovator had a good innovation, went to the king, and the king decided how they would use it. Now we don't have kings, but we have democracy, and we have the people. But the people do not sometimes know what is good for them, because they could not evaluate the results of the things that researchers and innovators give to them. So how we could protect society from itself, from ourselves, how we protect ourselves? The way to protect ourselves is to be alert, is to think and to see how we can use all these good innovation for the best cause. Facebook is a controversial issue, for instance, but the majority of the people do use it. This is a fact. We must face facts. So we must find a way to make the reverse, to make the bad effects less. That's the way to go forward.
Right. You're going to have one comment, and then one comment, because we need to close for coffee. Rainforest accredited.
I need to have a microphone? No.
Yeah, just
okay. Hello. Yeah. I'm going to give a comment which is way near to the ground, because I'm representing a users association, in fact. And when you say the king, we used to have the king who decides. Now, normally, it's the end user who should decide. And I want to remind you that the new trend in society is Uber. You know what Uber is? Yes. The Uberization of the society. And the good thing about it is that the people and the end users, they give the mark. They say, for Airbnb, they say, this flat is good. This tenant is nice. And this is a good way, perhaps, to Uberize. Not responsibility is not so important. What should be more important is perhaps to give a label, not to put more standards, but to put more labels.
We're going to have one other comment, which is going to be very, very quick.
So I'm quite happy with the statement Elena just made concerning the term responsibility. So in the field I'm working, this is agricultural biotechnology, when we are discussing responsibility, quite often there is the focus on the precautionary principle to try to avoid risks, which is not possible. And I think it's quite often a misuse or misinterpretation or misunderstanding of the precautionary principle. So you just mentioned yesterday the CRISPR-Cas. CRISPR-Cas has been defined just now by science as a breakthrough of the year. And if we will burn CRISPR-Cas as we have been burning
this is gene editing, by the way.
Yeah, but a special method in gene editing. When we will be burning CRISPR-Cas as we have been burned other plant breeding technologies, then I think we will be completely out-competed in Europe. So therefore, I think a right understanding of responsibility and a balance between risks and benefits is extremely important.
Okay. And on that note, we're going to finish. We've got a half an hour break. We have 3 parallel sessions. Can we just tell people where each of those parallel sessions are? So So the session A, which is on democratic horizons, is in 61. Session B, 63, which is that way. And session C, participatory approaches, is in here. I'm back in half an hour.